Paragraph 190. I will start the reading and then someone can take over from me. Political charity is also expressed in a spirit of openness to everyone. Government leaders should be the first to make the sacrifices that foster encounter and to seek convergence on at least some issues. They should be ready to listen to other points of view and to make room for everyone. Through sacrifices and patience, they can help to create a beautiful polyhedral reality in which everyone has a place. Here, economic negotiations do not work. Something else is required. An exchange of gifts for the common good. It may seem naive and utopian, yet we cannot renounce this lofty aim. I am of the opinion that this paragraph should be read at the beginning of every day in session of Congress. Political charity is also expressed in a spirit of openness to everyone. Government leaders should be the first to make the sacrifices that foster encounter and to seek convergence on at least some issues.
What does he mean by a polyhedral reality?
Polyhedral means many-sided.
Okay.
Whereas we tend to experience binary. And this is the Pope's lovely vocabulary at work telling us that issues are not binary. They have many, many sides. And if we keep approaching things as if they're always binary, we're going to end up in states of opposition.
What does he think? What do you think he means by economic negotiations do not work? I guess I'm so used to having two sides talk about something and come to an arrangement regarding how money is going to be spent. But I don't think that's what he means here. But I can't really grasp what his intent is with this particular phrase.
Yeah, I would think, and of course, this is based on everything he said before in this document. But my understanding here is that if we approach things first and foremost from the position of dollars and cents, we're always going to be starting from a position of deadlock.
Okay.
How do we spend this money? Whereas if we approach things from what are the issues at stake, what is it that needs to be accomplished? What is going to help people the most? And we start to work on what our solutions are and how we want to accomplish things, what it is we want to accomplish and how we want to accomplish it. Then we can start to talk about the resources that are available to accomplish the goals. Then the dollars and cents conversation is more useful and more meaningful. But if you start with that, you're locked into positions right away. I think we can see. I'm sorry, what, Ellen?
Approaching it from that opposite perspective instead of, like what you just said, to figure out what it is that needs to be done and how much that will cost, as opposed to, I want to spend this much, where am I going to divvy it up?
Right. And if the conversation is always focused on money first, you're always going to find people who are trying to protect the money instead of trying to protect the goal or achieve the goal. That's why the Pope is saying here, it doesn't work. First, talk about the need, talk about how you're going to fulfill the need, accomplish the need, then talk about the resources available to do that and how you use those resources. That's again, this is why you have to start the conversation realizing that these are polyhedral things, many-sided. not binary things. And again, it's this, we tend to approach things as binary. You're on this side or you're on that side. Well, no, there are all these other sides. There are all these other directions from which to come at things. But we are so used to polarity in our world and in our culture. That's just how we position things. That's how we structure arguments. And our political systems have reinforced that. So that's why we end up at odds with each other all the time, when if we would stop and remind ourselves of that, that reality isn't really like that, we might find more common ground. We might find that we have more common goals that we want to achieve, and that we have other ways of coming at things that don't put us in opposition to each other. Or that are complementary. Other thoughts on that paragraph? Again, I would love to see that paragraph read at the beginning of every day in Congress. It would frame the day's work in a whole new way for people. But that's my wishful thinking.
But Pastor, they have a framework. It's our Constitution. And they're not, in my opinion, oftentimes they're not living up to the word of the oath they swore to uphold.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, as beautiful as these words are, and as true as this meaning is, what's going to change their hearts? I don't know.
Well, and again, though, they even with the Constitution surrounding the work they do, they walk into their sessions in a binary frame of mind. Mm-hmm. 191. At a time when various forms of fundamentalist intolerance are damaging relationships between individuals, groups, and peoples, let us be committed to living and teaching the value of respect for others, a love capable of welcoming differences, and the priority of the dignity of every human being over his or her ideas, opinions, practices, and even sins. Even as forms of fanaticism, closed-mindedness, and social and cultural fragmentation proliferate in present-day society, a good politician will take the first step and insist that different voices be heard. Disagreements may well give rise to conflicts, but uniformity proves stifling and leads to cultural decay. May we not be content with being enclosed in one fragment of reality. Amen. Who would like to read from here? Anybody want to comment on that paragraph?
So should we do away with the filibuster rule?
No, just make it very painful.
That's a really interesting question, Bob.
Because the argument, of course, is that if you just let the majority rule, whoever's in the majority will just run over the minority.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it was created.
If the minority runs over the majority.
If you allow it in its current form, then you allow tyranny of the minority.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take it away, you allow tyranny of the majority.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the solution?
Wouldn't it be grand if it weren't tyranny? If people actually had the desire to work together, to negotiate and compromise, then it would work perfectly.
Well, but again, there's part of the polarity of a two-party system.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's also the attitude of obstructionism. I mean, if your whole goal is just to defeat anything the other side wants, then you're not negotiating, you're not compromising, you're not trying to work it out. And that's where I think that the filibuster is an erroneous tool.
Well, and that raises the whole issue of working in good faith.
Yeah, I wish we could.
Okay.
And I do think that there's some political coinage to be earned by showing a cooperative spirit between the parties.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a long time, the system worked well that way.
Yeah.
In the past.
Because I'm not sure moderates like myself, really think it's just a great idea to watch, the Democrats run over the Republicans or vice versa. So.
Oh, yeah. Nobody should run over anybody. Well, I mean, then it just becomes a very simple matter that if it's truly a democracy, then it's, the majority rule, whoever wins the most votes wins. But if your attitudes are both at the beginning to see what you can work out together, then it's a completely different situation, completely different issue.
Well, this is why, personally anyway, I find parliamentary systems where there are multiple parties intriguing, because they have to form coalitions. Yeah. And they have to compromise. Yeah. They have to come to agreements all the time. And you don't end up with the kind of polarity we see in our system, which leads to these stalemates where nothing gets done.
Exactly.
They have other problems. But, yeah. Who would like to read the next paragraph?
I can read.
Okay.
In this regard, Grand Ayman Ahmed Al-Kayeb and I have called upon the architects of international policy and world economy to work strenuously to spread the culture of tolerance and of living together in peace, to intervene at the earliest opportunities to stop the shredding of innocent blood. When a specific policy sows hatred and fear towards other nations in the name of its own country's welfare, there is a need to be concerned, to react in time and immediately to correct the course. Fruitfulness over results. Apart from their tireless activity, politicians are also men and women. They are called to practice love in their daily interpersonal relationships. As persons, they need to consider that the modern world, with its technical advances, tends increasingly to functionalize the satisfaction of human desires, now classified and subdivided among different services. Less and less will people be called by name. Less and less will this unique being be treated as a person with his or her own feelings, sufferings, problems, joys, and family. Their illnesses will be known only in order to cure them, their financial needs only to provide for them, their lack of a home only to give them lodging, their desires for recreation and entertainment only to satisfy them. Yet it must never be forgotten that loving the most insignificant of human beings as a brother, as if there were no one else in the world but him, cannot be considered a waste of time.
Yeah.
I reflected upon Karen Como's favorite actor, Randy Rainbow, and that I got caught up in the Biden one that he just released, but went back and read the AOC and listened to the AOC one that that he had, and so when they talk about that they are called to practice love in their daily interpersonal relationships, I flashed on that particular parody.
Yeah.
Fun stuff if I recommend them to you. But
you know, this is just going to sound so petty of me, but one of the things this made me think of is, you know, I go by my middle name. My first name is John, but I go by Stephen, my middle name. And there are people who just can't get that I talk to all the time, like calls from the doctor's office or calls from, you know, somebody who's reading my name off of a list, and they call me John. And I tell them, I use my middle name, Steve. And they go, oh, okay. Anyway, John. And it's like,
yes.
Yeah. And then I say, no, John was my dad. I'm Steve. Right. I'm sorry. Anyway, John. And it's just, it's like they can't get it, and they won't try, because I'm just another name on their list, and they've got to go through so many of these, and it's like I'm a non-person.
It doesn't fit in the system, right? Yeah, my mother is Lynn. I'm Ellen, but it doesn't fit in the system. The system is not equipped for four-name people. In my case.
Right.
Or for people who want to be, you know, first initial middle name. That's no, can't do that.
Exactly. The forms don't allow it.
Right.
There's no forms for people like me. Our former bishop had, and I had a long conversation about this one time, because he's our Guy Irwin, you know. And it's just, what do you do? Well, we don't have much choice. We have to surrender to the system.
Exactly.
And appreciate our friends who know enough to call us by the name we like.
The name we recognize as our own.
It's part of this.
Yeah. And poor Bryce goes through the same thing, you know, because he's James Bryce.
You know, as part of this, what they're talking about in the paragraph, that you know, there's no collective term, there's no composite that pulls all these things together, and so that we consider an individual, or maybe that's the word dignity is maybe how the Pope is using the word dignity is to handle that. But it occurs to me that what he's saying, I think, is that we don't see the whole person.
Right. Right. We don't.
And I don't necessarily agree with the approach, but you know, it kind of reminds me of the Chinese or China is now constructing a socialization index that'll be applied to each person, and they're gathering, you know, what party you belong to, whether you've been getting citations or not, how you get along with your neighbors, whether you've been under arrest, and they're putting all this stuff together, or, you know, what organizations you belong to into an index. And,
and you get socialization points.
Yes.
And you can lose socialization points. And if you're rude to somebody in the store, for instance, that scores against you. And yeah, your behavior is monitored all the time. It's a little scary, actually.
That's a little too granular, actually. But
yeah.
Politics, too, must make room for a tender love of others. What is tenderness? It is love that draws near and becomes real, a movement that starts from our heart and reaches the eyes, the ears, and the hands. Tenderness is the path of choice for the strongest, most courageous men and women. Amid the daily concerns of political life, the smallest, the weakest, the poorest should touch our hearts. Indeed, they have a right to appeal to our heart and soul. They are our brothers and sisters, and as such, we must love and care for them.
Oh, he's such a Franciscan.
All this can help us realize that what is important is not constantly achieving great results, since these are not always possible. In political activity, we should remember that, appearances notwithstanding, every person is immensely holy and deserves our love. Consequently, if I can help at least one person to have a better life, that already justifies the offering of my life. It is a wonderful thing to be God's faithful people. We achieve the fulfillment when we break down walls and our hearts are filled with faces and names. The great goals of our dreams and plans may only be achieved in part, yet beyond this, those who love and who no longer view politics merely as a quest for power may be sure that none of our acts of love will be lost, nor any of our acts of sincere concern for others. No single act of love for God will be lost. No generous effort is meaningless. No painful endurance is wasted. All of these encircle our world like a vital force. For this reason, it is truly noble to place our hope in the hidden power of the seeds of the goodness we sow, and thus to initiate processes whose fruits will be reaped by others. Good politics combines love with hope and with confidence in the reserves of goodness present in human hearts. Indeed, authentic political life, built upon respect for law and frank dialogue between individuals, is constantly renewed whenever there is a realization that every woman and man and every new generation brings the promise of new relational, intellectual, cultural, and spiritual energies.
Wow.
I'm also reminded, though, that as new generations come along, they kind of accept what they find, and so they don't necessarily look back on the struggle that made something or caused something. I mean, like millennials have no concept of inflation, and it's going to be news for them. But
yeah, unless that small group of economists who think that we aren't going to ever have it again are correct.
Yeah.
You know, I'm looking at the footnotes, and at one of them, it's a little ways back, it appears as though Pope Francis must have had a TED Talk. And that looks like it might be really an interesting thing to review. It says that on 191, a video message to the TED conference in Vancouver, and that was in 2017. So it very well might be that he had a TED Talk. I think it would be interesting to hear him make some of these comments and the reaction of the comments. Just
yeah, that would be fun.
Anything else? Viewed in this way, politics is something more noble than posturing, marketing, and media spin. These sow nothing but division, conflict, and a bleak cynicism incapable of mobilizing people to pursue a common goal. At times, in thinking of the future, we do well to ask ourselves, why am I doing this? What is my real aim? For as time goes on, reflecting on the past, the questions will not be, how many people endorsed me? How many voted for me? How many had a positive image of me? The real and potentially painful questions will be, how much love did I put into my work? What did I do for the progress of our people? What mark did I leave on the life of society? What real bonds did I create? What positive forces did I unleash? How much social peace did I sow? What good did I achieve in the position that was entrusted to me?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Chapter 6, Dialogue and Friendship in Society. Approaching, speaking, listening, looking at, coming to know and understand one another, and to find common ground. All these things are summed up in one word, dialogue. If we want to encounter and help one another, we have to dialogue. There is no need for me to stress the benefits of dialogue. I have only to think of what our world would be like without the patient dialogue of the many generous persons who keep families and communities together. Unlike disagreement and conflict, persistent and courageous dialogue does not make headlines, but quietly helps the world to live much better than we imagine. You mean there's more than a Twitter universe? Anyway. Social dialogue for a new culture. Some people attempt to flee from reality, taking refuge in their own little world. Others react to it with destructive violence. Yet, between selfish indifference and violent protest, there are always another possible option, that of dialogue. Dialogue between generations, dialogue among our people, for we are that people, readiness to give and receive, while remaining open to the truth. A country flourishes when constructive dialogue occurs between its many rich cultural components: popular culture, university culture, youth culture, artistic culture, technological culture, economic culture, family culture, and media culture. Dialogue is often confused with something quite different: the feverish exchange of opinions on social networks, frequently based on media information that is not always reliable. These exchanges are merely parallel monologues. They may attract some attention by their sharp and aggressive tone, but monologues engage no one, and their content is frequently self-serving and contradictory.
Ain't that the truth?
Indeed, the media's noisy potpourri of facts and opinions is often an obstacle to dialogue, since it lets everyone cling stubbornly to his or her own ideas, interests, and choices, with the excuse that everyone else is wrong. It becomes easier to discredit and insult opponents from the onset than to open a respectful dialogue aimed at achieving agreement on a deeper level. Worse, this kind of knowledge, especially drawn from media coverage of political campaigns, has become so widespread as to be a part of daily conversation. Discussion is often manipulated by powerful special interests that seek to tilt public opinion unfairly in their favor. This kind of manipulation can be exercised not only by governments, but also in economics, politics, communications, religion, and in other spheres. Attempts can be made to justify or excuse it when it tends to serve one's own economic or ideological interests, but sooner or later, it turns against those very interests.
This points to me to just being isolated on what news sources, what you select, or how, if you select a variety of sources, or if you just stay in one. It's very interesting to hear a one-sided approach on reporting of the news, and it's so important, and it's hard for some people, and I'm thinking specifically of a couple of my grandchildren that are so, in my opinion, uninformed because they're listening to only one source. rather than having an open mind and listening to a variety of opinions and the way in which information is presented.
Yeah.
It's scary. It really is frightening to think that there's only one source being drilled into some people's heads.
Yep.
I think it's also interesting when you when you seek different sources of news in order to, or on a particular issue. I find it fascinating and enlightening to see how different outlets will handle a particular story. And to listen from a single point of view tends to color your feeling about, or your judgment about some event or some political story. But when you look at that news story from multiple sources, number one, you begin to see how the media can shift the point of view, and also shift your point of view and your judgment on something by how they have presented it. But I think it also helps when you source news from a number of sources, that it gives you enables you to be more critically aware of the gist of the story.
Yeah. I've always found, for me personally, it's always good too to have a couple of news sources that are from outside the country.
Yeah.
BBC. Oh, what is it in Canada?
CBC.
Yeah.
NPR.
Reuters, from, which is Dutch.
We also have NHK, which is from Asia or Japan.
Yeah, but when you hear stories reported from other countries, and you hear how they see it, it just really adds a whole other dimension to the balance of what's being seen. Because, and there's that polyhedral thing again, because it's not binary anymore. And you're hearing from people who stand outside it and are looking in from another direction, and they don't have a horse in the race.
Almost, do you listen to NHK somehow? And how do you find it?
It's on Spectrum.
Oh.
I couldn't tell you. Oh, it's one of the PBS stations on Spectrum. At the moment I couldn't tell you. I could find it for you and let you know, Bob. But it's one of the PBS stations. And
do you find their position markedly different or enlightening?
I wouldn't say markedly different, but it definitely the emphasis is different. The emphasis on what they consider to be the key points of the news are different. The other issue that I take with some of the media is that on the 30-minute broadcasts, they address the high points of an issue, but they really don't get to the meat of it. And I think that's another reason why it's important to source your information from not only from the televised media or even the radio media, but also from the print media as well, because print media is able to spend a little bit more time and be a little more, delve deeper into an issue. So anyway.
How many of you read The Week?
Never heard of it.
I was just thinking that's really good for giving
Yeah, The Week is a weekly news magazine. It's not cheap, unfortunately, but they go through like all the major news issues every week, but they have a synopsis coming from a variety of sources that cover the spectrum, the political spectrum. So you get this one from the Washington Post, you get this little blurb from the New York Times, you get this one from the New York News, you get all of the different viewpoints are covered as they cover a story. So you're not getting just a single picture. You're getting the way that the different viewpoints came at it. It's a good source to kind of have an overview of how people are seeing things. And it's a quick read for a quick overview of the news of the week. Plus they have great political cartoons.
And crossword puzzles.
Yeah.
That's, I love it. The feed that I get every day from Heather Cox Richardson. And one of the things I like the most about it is she always references all of her sources, and so that you can do your own fact checking. You can, I like the fact that there's the information is there, but there's also, support for what she's saying.
Yeah, I really like her daily newsletter also. The other thing I really like about her is that she's a historian. Mm-hmm. So that when she brings that perspective to what she's reporting on every day. She's got that sense of history behind her when she renders her description of what's going on in the news and why it will matter and how it will probably play out, just because she's watched history play out, and she can refer back to other things in history and say, this isn't what we're seeing is an echo of what happened at this other time, and this is what we need to watch out for.
We're doing it again.
Yeah, exactly. Here's what we didn't learn. So now's the time to build your bomb shelter. Oh. Okay.
Lack of dialogue means that in these individual sectors, people are concerned not for the common good, but for the benefits of power, or at best, for ways to impose their own ideas. Roundtables thus become mere negotiating sessions in which individuals attempt to seize every possible advantage, rather than cooperating in the pursuit of the common good. The heroes of the future will be those who can break with this unhealthy mindset and determine respectfully to promote truthfulness aside from personal interest. God willing, such heroes are quietly emerging, even now, in the midst of our society.
God willing.
Building together. Authentic social dialogue involves the ability to respect the other's point of view and to admit that it may include legitimate convictions and concerns. Based on their identity and experience, others have a contribution to make, and it is desirable that they should articulate their position for the sake of a more fruitful public debate. When individuals or groups are consistent in their thinking, defend their values and convictions, and develop their arguments, this surely benefits society. Yet this can only occur to the extent that there is genuine dialogue and openness to others. Indeed, in a true spirit of dialogue, we grow in our ability to grasp the significance of what others say and do, even if we cannot accept it as our own conviction. In this way, it becomes possible to be frank and open about our beliefs, while continuing to discuss, to seek points of contact, and to, above all, to work and struggle together. Public discussion if it truly makes room for everyone and does not manipulate or conceal information, is a constant stimulus to a better grasp of the truth, or at least its more effective expression. It keeps different sectors from becoming complacent and self-centered in their outlook and their limited concerns. Let us not forget that differences are creative. They create tension, and in the resolution of tension lies humanity's progress. I'm encouraged, and you know, I haven't seen enough of him to make a real judgment yet, but I was encouraged listening to our new Secretary of State respond to questions the other day, and noticed that he always started with a principle and then worked from there. And so he would say, this is what we're trying to do, or this is the goal, or this is the important thing, and here's how we're doing it. And I thought, what a, you know, how refreshing to hear, you know, a statement put in those terms. But
yeah. There is a kind of thoughtfulness that seems to be at work now.
There is a growing conviction that, together with specialized scientific advances, we are in need of greater interdisciplinary communication. Although reality is one, it can be approached from various angles and with different methodologies. There is a risk that a single scientific advance will be seen as the only possible lens for viewing a particular aspect of life, society, and the world. Researchers who are expert in their own field, yet also familiar with the findings of other sciences and disciplines, are in a position to discern other aspects of the object of their study, and thus to become open to a more comprehensive and integral knowledge of reality.
Interesting.
Tough to do.
I saw a book advertised today that I'm so intrigued by. I'm not allowing myself to buy any more books for a while, but this one really intrigued me because it's about physics and theology.
Oh, wow. That's right up your alley.
Yeah, and it's written by a physicist. It's written by a physicist, and it's about how he sees in physics a really strong argument for the existence of God, especially when he gets down deep into the inner layers of quantum physics. And then, like you said, Margie, this is just like pure brain candy for me.
Yeah.
But that last bit about a single, you know, scientific advances could lead us to wanting to look at things through a single lens. I could see the danger of that. I could see the danger of that happening, for instance, in biology through CRISPR technology, or I could see the danger of that in physics as our understanding of quantum mechanics develops even further, or our abilities with nuclear fusion develop more thoroughly, and that has the potential to become such a powerful and ubiquitous source of energy. But we're going to need all those things, and we can't make any one of them the linchpin for where we go next. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm going off on tangents.
In today's globalized world, the media can help us to feel closer to one another, creating a sense of the unity of the human family, which in turn can inspire solidarity and serious effort to ensure a more dignified life for all. The media can help us greatly in this, especially nowadays when the networks of human communication have made unprecedented advances. The internet, in particular, offers immense possibilities for encounter and solidarity. This is something truly good, a gift from God. We need constantly to ensure that present-day forms of communication are in fact guiding us to generous encounter with others, to honest pursuit of the whole truth, to service, to closeness to the underprivileged, and to the promotion of the common good. As our bishops of Australia have pointed out, we cannot accept a digital world designed to exploit our weaknesses and bring out the worst in people.
Like Q.
And Australia isn't Australia the one that's and the United States, of course, is currently burdened with this inquiry into Facebook and Google, and I'm wondering if this wouldn't be a good start of a goal for a standard for both these groups. The basis of consensus. The solution is not relativism. Under the guise of tolerance, relativism ultimately leads the interpretation of moral values to those in power, to be defined as they see fit. In the absence of objective truth or sound principles, other than the satisfaction of our own desires and immediate needs, we should not think that political efforts or the force of law will be sufficient. When the culture itself is corrupt and objective truth and universally valid principles are no longer upheld, then laws can only be seen as arbitrary impositions or obstacles to be avoided. Boy, is that true.
That's well said.
Yeah.
It occurs to me that in the kind of age of the internet, there's a lack of accountability. And so, and this is, not a news flash, but you can put anything out on the internet that you want because of your anonymity. And there's no fact checking that goes into it. And we've talked about this. It's been brought up before as we have gone through this encyclical about the fairness doctrine for licensed stations, requiring that stations that are licensed by the government be required to offer both sides of a issue. 1987, I think, is when that was done away with. And we've kind of seen this slide into media reporting without lack of accountability, more media reporting / commentary than actually news that's been sourced appropriately. I would welcome the fairness doctrine being reintroduced again.
Oh, I would too. But how would you do it on the internet? That's a big question. I mean,
it is a big question, and I mean, it's really an open question as well. But at least you could start. You could start somewhere.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could categorize messaging so that it would fall into a subject matter category, and the pros and cons would all be kind of mushed together. So anyway, so if you wanted to, of course we follow people rather than categories, so that doesn't seem to work very well.
Would that be another method of control?
Yeah. Because all the freedom of speech people rise up, and the minute you try to put structure around some of this stuff. Going on. Is it possible to be concerned for truth, to seek truth that responds to life's deepest meaning? What is law without the conviction, born of age-old reflection and great wisdom, that each human being is sacred and inviolable? If society is to have a future, it must respect the truth of our human dignity and submit to that truth. Murder is not wrong simply because it is socially unacceptable and punished by law, but because of a deeper conviction. This is a non-negotiable truth attained by the use of reason and accepted in conscience. A society is noble and decent not least for its support of the pursuit of truth and its adherence to the most basic of truths. We need to learn how to unmask the various ways that truth is manipulated, distorted, and concealed in public and private discourse. What we call truth is not only the reporting of facts and events, such as we find in the daily papers. It is primarily the search for the solid foundations sustaining our decisions and our laws. This calls for acknowledging that the human mind is capable of transcending immediate concerns and grasping certain truths that are unchanging, as true now as in the past. And it peers into human nature. Reason discovers universal values derived from that same nature.
Mm.
Otherwise, it is not conceivable that those fundamental human rights, which we now consider unassailable, will be denied by those in power once they have gained the consensus of an apathetic or intimidated population. Nor would a mere consensus between different nations, itself equally open to manipulation, suffice to protect them. We have ample evidence of the great good of which we are capable. Yet we also have to acknowledge our inherent destructiveness. It is not the indifference and the heartless individualism into which we have fallen, also a result of our sloths in pursuing higher values, values that transcend our immediate needs. Relativism always brings the risk that some or other alleged truth will be imposed by the powerful or the clever. Yet when it is a matter of the moral norms prohibiting intrinsic evil, there are no privileges or exceptions for anyone. It makes no difference whether one is master of the world or the poorest of the poor on the face of the earth. Before the demands of morality, we are all absolutely equal.
All right. Well, we are at 10:58. Shall we leave the last couple minutes for discussion? Oh, we're at 2:10. You want to just read that one, and then we'll have a couple minutes of discussion?
What is now happening, and are drawing us into a perverse and barren way of thinking, is a reduction of ethics and politics to physics. Good and evil no longer exist in themselves. There is only a calculus of benefits and burdens. As a result of the displacement of moral reason, the law is no longer seen as reflecting a fundamental notion of justice, but as mirroring notions currently in vogue. Breakdown ensues. Everything is leveled down by a superficial bartered consensus. In the end, the law of the strongest prevails.
Well, that's quite an indictment in that last paragraph.
Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts from anybody? That the law is no longer seen as reflecting a fundamental notion of justice, but as mirroring notions currently in vogue. Fight. No. Sometimes it seems that way.
Bill is deep in thought. He's mulling something over. You couldn't even hear me.
It gets difficult though, because sometimes we're trying to think our way, as a culture, we're trying to think our way through issues of both personal freedom and morality. And law becomes involved in that. I'm thinking in particular of the abortion issue, choice. It's not always as clear cut and dried as we would like to make it.
Agreed.
And the issues that dance around it can't always be easily and simply decided by blanket law. Arkansas today, the governor of Arkansas is signing a bill that will pretty much make all abortion illegal in the state of Arkansas, except to save the mother's life. He said he would prefer it if the bill had included in cases of rape or incest, but that's not in it, so he's still going to sign it. That means there is no choice in Arkansas.
Right.
It also means that there's going to be the whole dance with the courts and probably find its way up to the Supreme Court.
Yep.
And we'll just keep having this fight over and over and over and over and over again. But it's a difficult issue, personal freedom and the freedom of a woman's right to control what happens with her own body. And this is where there's just a lot about life to be taken into consideration. It's not simply morality. Well, it is and it isn't, even, you know.
Yeah. That's called waffling.
well, yeah, but I mean, you know what I'm saying.
Yes, I do. Yeah, my hackles went up when you started this conversation.
It's the same thing with capital punishment. I mean, you know, is it right to take another human's life for the actions?
Yeah.
You know, it's that one.
Or someone taking another human's life. Yeah, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That's the only way to look at it. Which do you abide by? Which law is it that you want to follow?
Oh.
That, I think then it goes back to individual freedom and individual. And that's why it's so important to be able to have an open discussion about it rather than have a finite control or
Well, to go back to abortion, every pregnancy has the potential to put the mother's life at risk.
Yes.
Every pregnancy makes huge demands on the mother's body. Should the law have the authority to insist that that happens to a woman? And should the law take the woman's voice and choice away in that matter? Should the law take away her self-determination in that matter?
No.
Well, and I agree. I agree, but others don't agree.
Right.
Well, to me, the issue is that the law doesn't take that away. It just puts the mother's life at greater risk because she has to achieve her goal in an illegal and unhealthful manner. You know, I mean, it seems like the purpose of those laws is, I mean, I'm sorry. It's kind of like, it's the same attitude that if people had that same attitude about gun control, you know, they say there's no point in making laws because people who want guns are going to have guns anyway. Well, it's exactly the same thing. The women who want and need abortions are going to have them anyway. So you're not preventing any deaths, you know? And so, I don't know. It's circular, sorry.
Oh, I don't think they're the same thing, but we can argue that all day.
Yeah, right.
No, I mean, not the same thing, but I mean, it's the same kind of, what happens is it becomes a completely circular argument that, you know, like, I think like you said initially, it can't be blanket. It needs to be.
I have a different approach to the death penalty argument, because when the state imposes the death penalty, the state is us, and the state is acting on our behalf. Yeah. I do not want to kill anyone. I do not want the state killing anyone on my behalf. Mm-hmm. I am opposed to it for that reason. Yeah, don't do that in my name.
Right.
What bothers me a little bit about these two paragraphs is that the Pope is not, the Pope isn't looking to a Christian standard, because he seems to be looking at you know, kind of the laws of nature and nature's God, and that's really hard to pin down. I mean, I think part of the reason I'm a Christian is that I enjoy the certainty of kind of knowing what the standard is. And this makes me a little bit uneasy because we're talking about people defining good and evil. Anyway, that's just personal opinion here.
No, I agree, Bob. I understand what you're saying. I think it's just difficult when we try to legislate that faith, you know, or that the tenets of that faith that you were saying, the standards that are, you know, bring you comfort in their security. You know, then what is it the government's place to legislate that?
Yeah, good and evil are tricky to pin down. We know when we see them.
Pretty tough labels to overcome.
Mm.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, now.
Well,
go think on that.
Yeah.
This has been fun.
Thought-provoking. Thought-provoking.
Love you all.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right, all of you. Have a good week, and I will see you Sunday.
Hey.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody.